Who's hungry for more Breath of the Wild 2? Yes, everybody is hungry for more Breath of the Wild 2 because this is the most anticipated Switch sequel, and yet we know so little. I mean, we know Link's got the arm and Zelda's falling in the sky and the ground and zoom with the new powers, but that's it. We don't know all the mechanics, we definitely don't know the story, and we don't even know the title of this game, but we have a super massive leak with all sorts of mechanics, gameplay, and story details that I find fascinating. So what's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Hit that like button if you're excited for Breath of the Wild 2. It's supposed to come out in 2022. It better come out in 2022. Cross everything you've got so that this game actually does drop. And let me know what you think of this leak in the comments down below. Now, I do need to issue a warning because there's a good chance that this is not true. Okay, it comes from 4chan and it is a long list. We're gonna go through it one by one, but I will tell you that this all lines up. It's all very sensible. There's nothing outlandish or crazy, and despite what some people say, 4chan has been reputable in the past. All right, they did leak Breath of the Wild stuff, and they did leak the Nintendo Switch reveal event and all the games, so there's a chance that this is the Breath of the Wild 2 that we will play, hopefully, later this year. Let's go through it one by one because this is just so interesting, all right? Oh, and just wait until we talk about the Zelda Link character swap and puzzle action. Mwah! Starting at the top. The reason for Link not having the Master Sword at the beginning of Breath of the Wild 2 is that he returned it to the Korok Forest, which is now floating in the sky. Okay, that's very interesting and very gracious of Link to give that back. Game difficulty is the same, not harder or easier. That makes perfect sense, a very simple thing. More traditional dungeons, as well as a replacement for shrines, which are even older ruins located all over the overworld. Now, we've heard and we've thought and we've discussed dungeons coming back. We know that, Link and Zelda, the franchise, is all about dungeon supremacy, as Miyamoto once said. So this would make perfect sense. It'd be kind of the perfect blend of old Zelda, new Zelda, and kind of the only missing link in Breath of the Wild traditional dungeons, now just supersizing the sequel into an even better game. Now, a replacement for shrines, that also makes sense. Shrines were a huge part of Breath of the Wild, and I don't foresee the sequel getting away from them, but at the same time, having just a bunch more shrines would probably be a little bit pedestrian, and so coming up with a new kind of way, a new ruin, and maybe throwing in a bunch of new mechanics would be really interesting. Now, speaking of new mechanics, wait till you hear about that. It says the setup is just like the first game, but with a more dramatic intro. Mostly the same enemies with some evolutions. Music is still simple, but sounds out of tune. I'm not really sure what that latter line means, but mostly the same enemies would make sense. There's kind of a debate about how much is Nintendo recycling from Breath of the Wild 1, and how much do fans want them to recycle. I don't think we need a 100% new game, but I also don't want to see just like cut and paste world and like new missions and a few new set piece events. So mostly the same enemies sounds pretty good. Some new ones, some evolutions of enemy types. I like that. They say new underground enemies that can play around with time mechanics. Now we know that there's a lot of interesting time mechanics and maybe other sorts of interesting like manipulative dimensional powers. We see Link going back in time with the big boulder rolling up or down the hill, however you like to put it. And then we also see him zooping right through a piece of earth or a piece of land. And I'm not sure if that's time related or if that's just he can turn all goopy like, destroy his molecular structure. Anyways, underground enemies sounds pretty dope. Items still have the same durability, which I think will be a bummer for some people, but there are some enemies that have a time reversal mechanic that ends up with your weapons healing each time you strike them. Now this is a genius idea. Certain enemies that you can just go ham on, melee mashing to revitalize your weapon. I love that a lot, and I think if this game is really all about time. I mean, they say next that the plot revolves around time manipulation and another dimension, that this would be the most intriguing way to incorporate all sorts of different gameplay elements and story elements and even character elements, all tied towards this sort of time idea. And maybe all the different spirals and all the different glyphs that we see in the early trailers are indicating and hinting at just that. Now we're getting to some of the really juicy stuff. All right, they say the green arm is a motif for courage. The arm is the last power from a sage that gives you new mechanics. Now, of everything on the list, this is the only one that strikes me as a bit off. The arm is the last power from a sage. Now, the arm was shown off in like the first gameplay trailer, so it would be odd to me if the arm was something acquired late game. I feel like the arm must be an early game acquisition, but I guess they could just be trying to hype up something brand new and maybe something that's critical to like the overall theme, I guess, of Breath of the Wild 2, but that part seems a bit odd to me. I do like the inclusion of sages, and I'm all down for more of those and more new mechanics. And here is the best part. Zelda plays a role in character swap mechanic. She's in another dimension, and you have to switch characters for puzzles to influence the regular Hyrule overworld and vice versa. Lots of teamwork between Link and Zelda. This is where it's at. Now I know some players were excited for true co-op, but hey, the ability to swap back and forth between Link and Zelda for sweet puzzle solving in different dimensions that affect things in the other dimensions sounds brilliant, and I'm all about it. This right here is what I hope is in the game the most. The ability to control Zelda, have her be an important playable character, and allow puzzle solving to include two characters for all sorts of dynamic challenges. I think that would make things so cool, and to have sort of that like split dimensional, other Hyrule and real Hyrule. I mean, we've seen Zelda explore Dark Worlds before, so this is right on trend, and I love it. I just love it. They say Zelda has the Sheikah Slate. No real combat for her from what was played, mostly stealth and puzzle solving for Zelda. No gear, inventory is just materials and quests. So Zelda, she's nerfed. She's a stealth and puzzle solving master, but she does have the Sheikah Slate. Now this is interesting because most people assume that Link will just retain the Sheikah Slate since it was so integral to the first adventure in Breath of the Wild 1. Apparently, he does not use any of the Slate features because Zelda uses the Slate features from Breath of the Wild 1 in her puzzle solving. Okay, not for combat, but for puzzle solving. And if you look carefully at the trailer, it has clearly shown that Link don't have the Sheikah Slate. There's nowhere where he's actually having it or using it, so perhaps this next one is accurate. Link only uses the new powers from the sages while Zelda uses the Slate features from Breath of the Wild 1. I think that would be a brilliant way to take what was great in Breath of the Wild 1 and not just scrap it, still bring it aboard, but then introduce new mechanics, new powers, new awesome ways to interact with the world, as we saw a hint of in the trailer, and still have some of the best parts of BOTW 1 in the game. This is like ideal scenario for me, that Zelda is BOTW 1 and Link is BOTW 2, and they fuse together to solve puzzles in 2 dimensions. Awesome, amazing. Maybe that's why Zelda is falling deep down into the underground or to the other dimension at the very beginning of the trailer there. I love this idea. I know you guys are gonna have a lot of thoughts on this, so let me hear it. Zelda playable? She don't have combat. Is that like a misstep, or do you like this puzzle solving idea and giving her Sheikah Slate and Link new sage powers? Apparently there's a lot of Ocarina of Time references. Makes sense, I guess. There's, in quotes, identity of the lead sage should satisfy you. And that makes me think that the lead sage is a very popular character from the franchise, either from Breath of the Wild 1 or maybe from a different part of the universe. Apparently there's a surrealist tone and a kill the past storyline about champions taking place as new sages with a more traditional Link, Ganon, Zelda plot. So it'd be good to see the champions back. We know they featured heavily in the Champions Ballad. It makes sense to build upon sort of that plot level. Now, a more traditional Link, Ganon, Zelda plot, I'm not really sure like how basic they're talking. I like the plot line of Breath of the Wild 1. Maybe it would be cool to just kind of go back more traditionally, but I hope they don't like water it down. I mean, it is a sequel, so it should build, and I would expect some dynamic complexity within what's going on, but we don't know exactly how that's going to take shape, so we'll, TBD on that. Apparently there's 6 total dungeons, which sounds like a fair amount. It sounds reasonable considering this is a big open world. I don't think they're going to throw like 20 dungeons in there or even 12 dungeons. Apparently it takes place almost immediately after Breath of the Wild 1, so it like picks up right after. They say they never saw Ganon, but from what we saw, we understand that the undead form of Ganon is invincible, and Link and Zelda have to work to restore Ganon's physical prime form to be able to injure him. So Ganon is a ghost, and they got to bring back his body if they want to rid the world of his ridiculousness. They also say that Bolson dies, now a ghost who gives hints like Cass in Breath of the Wild 1. And they asked apparently 3 things that weren't in the trailers that we've seen. And this leaker said there's Landmola that are the size of 2 horses that burrow between sky islands, double sword weapons, and a power that slows time and speeds up Link. So taking this all into account, it's like we got sky, we got underground, we got other dimension. There is a lot packed in. Can Nintendo pack that much in? Can they deliver Hyrule as it was in Breath of the Wild 1, but with new twist, but then also deliver sky as we've seen, Link floating around? Can they deliver underground with these interesting new enemies? Can they deliver alternate dimension? with Zelda, or perhaps she's trapped in the underground and that is the other dimension. Either way, this sounds amazing. And it sounds reasonable. There's nothing crazy here, right? There's nothing like, oh my god, there's 4-player co-op and it's back to 4 swords. I mean, there's some things that are interesting, like, okay, enemies that do rejuvenate your items and controlling Zelda, and like, those are, I guess, some more like big ideas and like hopes and dreams, but they all sound like they could be part of a sequel, especially one that Nintendo has been developing for quite some time and that clearly is getting the TLC it deserves because they know they gotta deliver. They know that we need the feast of all feasts for our fantastic sequel to many people's favorite Switch game, favorite Zelda game, maybe even favorite Nintendo game of all time, Breath of the Wild 1. Again, you gotta take this with a grain of salt because it could be complete hogwash. But it looks good. It sounds good. And we're getting to that time where, okay, maybe they are moving closer and closer to a big blowout reveal. If it's hitting in 2022, we gotta be getting near that. We know a Direct is coming sometime soon. Could we see more Breath of the Wild? What's your favorite part about this? For me, it's obviously Zelda grab and hold the Sheikah Slate and doing those co-op, lonely co-op puzzle actions where you get to control both characters, swapping back and forth. I think that sounds amazing. Let me know what you think. Hit that like button if you're excited. And until next time, my wonderful friends, I love you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. SwitchForce out.